Police say the body of a missing Center County woman found near the same place she was last seen. Susan Bachmann disappeared into the woods.
Some mysteries refuse to stay buried. For years, these cases haunted families, baffled investigators, and lingered without answers. Then something shifted. A detail surfaced. A voice came forward. Out of dozens of stories, 19 cases, once labeled impossible, were finally solved. Disappearances, shocking crimes, and unexpected turns all collide here. Each case followed a different path, but all reached a moment where the truth could no longer hide. This isn't about what went wrong, it's about what finally went right. The real question is, which clue changed everything? The 37-year-old runaway. In July 2014, 37-year-old Susan Bachmann, who struggled with anxiety and depression, agreed to voluntarily commit herself to a psychiatric facility in Clarion, Pennsylvania.
She had volunteered to go, but in the car, she kept saying, "I'm afraid."
She bolted from the car as it was driving down the highway and ran into the woods.
Her parents drove her to the center, but during the trip, she became increasingly frightened, repeatedly saying she was afraid and uneasy. Without warning, Bachmann opened the car door and jumped out while the vehicle was traveling roughly 50 miles per hour. Witnesses saw her roll across the pavement, then stand up and run into nearby woods as her parents called the police immediately. Canine search teams, along with a helicopter, surveyed the region and retrieved Bachmann's cell phone and wallet from within a deserted barn, but were unable to locate her. After months, her handbag and clothes were found in the same area, which led to the use of cadaver dogs in the search again. Although the case was highly publicized, the public's tips didn't clarify anything regarding her survival or what happened after that. Eventually, time and routine investigation provided the only resolution. In March 2015, the investigators found her skull and some vertebrae in the forest. The coroner declared her death an accident, probably due to the fall and its related injuries. The case was closed without a fuss, giving explanations, but also highlighting that mental illness could result in tragic and irreversible consequences. The tale of the victim is a warning about people's lack of protection in times of crises and the limitations of rescue attempts for families who are under scary circumstances and looking for help. You might think that was as intense as it gets, but the next case raises the stakes in a way no one expected. Jealousy turned deadly. In 1996, 17-year-old Daphne Boyden was slain inside her Vallejo, California home in a crime that horrified the community. The slayer shot her, set her body on fire, and fled the scene with her 25-day-old son, Lyson Williams. Witnesses reported seeing two young women leaving the home, but police quickly ran out of solid leads. The case gained attention after being publicly featured later that year. Yet investigators still struggled to identify a suspect. For years, Daphne's slaying and her baby's disappearance remained unsolved, leaving the family and authorities without answers. The infant was eventually recovered safely, but the identity of the slayer remained hidden, frustrating detectives and devastating loved ones. The case was, however, only solved in 2002 after an anonymous informant got in touch following the story's rebroadcast. The police detained Latasha Brown, who admitted to slaying Daphne with a cousin's assistance. Brown committed the crime and then thus burned the house down and kidnapped the baby before running away to another state to avoid being unnoticed. The prosecutors disclosed that the reason behind the crime was jealousy. Brown had a history with the father's daughter, and it was a doubly irrational and furious reaction of hers that led to the slaying. After running away to Texas and acquiring a fake ID, she eventually came back to Vallejo and brought up a kid just a few miles away from where the slaying happened. Brown was found guilty and given a 37-year prison term, which, at last, made possible the implementation of justice years after the savage slaying. Justice for Mia Zapata. In the early 1990s, Seattle's music scene was booming, and Mia Zapata was at its heart as the powerful frontwoman of the punk band The Gits. At just 27, she was admired for her talent and warmth. Her brutal slaying on July 7, 1993, stunned the city and abruptly ended a rising career that many believed was about to break through nationally. Police investigated several leads, including reports of a scream near her last known location and the possibility of an attack by a cab driver. Despite attention from multiple television programs and documentaries, the case quickly stalled. For nearly 10 years, Zapata's slaying remained unsolved, leaving her family, fans, and the music community without answers. In 2002, advances in forensic science changed everything. DNA evidence taken from Zapata's body was matched to Jesus Mezquia, who was living in Florida at the time. Mezquia had a long criminal record and had been living in Seattle with a girlfriend when the slaying occurred. Mezquia was convicted of first-degree slaying and sentenced to 36 years in prison. He died in custody in 2021, never released. The case stands as a powerful example of persistence and delayed justice, finally delivering accountability. Love sort of wins. In the fall of 1953 in Jamestown, New York, Eleanor Platt, a white woman, fell in love with John Elias, a black man. Because of the era's racism, they lived together in secret and planned to marry quietly. Eleanor believed love would prevail once her family learned she was pregnant. When Platt told her parents, the reaction was swift and brutal. Elias was chased away at gunpoint, insulted with racist slurs, and falsely accused of indecent assault. He received a 9-month jail sentence, while Eleanor was confined to a home for unwed mothers and forced to surrender her baby, Rose Marie, for adoption under the immense social pressure of the time. Years went by with the pair being apart, and nobody knew what had happened to their daughter. Elias got married eventually, but he still kept on wondering about the fate of Eleanor and their lost child. Later on, when the former lovers met again, they decided to go on TV, thinking that perhaps someone would recognize their daughter and that the latter would then be able to come out of hiding and bring at last some light to the issue that had lasted for decades. And that was a good call. When a family friend recognized the story, Rose Marie, now bearing the name of Sally Riley, was 37 years old and living in Pennsylvania. Thus, mother and daughter met again after such a long time. Although the years of separation could never be wiped off completely, the family received the benefits of truth, bond, and a common future together, which was made possible by the combination of their persistence, chance recognition, and a public cry for justice. Interrogation with the Vampire. In 1996, a quiet Florida town was shaken when Richard and Naomi Ruth Wendorf were beaten to death with a metal bar inside their home.
November 1996, a brutal beating ended 2 lives in Eustis, Florida, a half an hour or so northwest of Orlando. 49-year-old Richard Wendorf and his wife Ruth killed in their own home.
The brutality of the crime stunned investigators, but what made the case even more disturbing was the strange subculture tied to the suspects and their beliefs. Police quickly focused on a teenage vampire cult connected to a recent dog shelter break-in, where animals were slain. Their attention centered on 16-year-old Rod Ferrell, a self-proclaimed vampire obsessed with Interview with a Vampire, blood rituals, and claims of immortality. Ferrell was romantically involved with the Wendorf's daughter, Heather, drawing further suspicion. Ferrell and several followers were arrested and charged with slaying. Heather was eventually cleared, but Ferrell pleaded guilty. He claimed he had slain the couple because Heather said she hated her parents and wanted them dead. His explanation fueled intense media coverage during a sensational trial watched nationwide. Farrell was initially sentenced to death, but because he was a minor, the sentence was reduced to life in prison. Embracing his delusions, he claimed to be 500 years old. The case remains one of the most bizarre and unsettling slaying stories in true crime history. New Kids fan. 16-year-old Lynn Nixon vanished from her neighborhood in 1987, leaving her family desperate for answers. Her disappearance gained national attention when the case was featured on television 2 years later. Despite widespread exposure and emotional pleas, the broadcast failed to generate solid leads, and Lynn's fate remained an agonizing mystery for everyone involved deeply. A few years later, Lynn's mother was watching a New Kids on the Block music video when she noticed a teenage girl in the audience who looked remarkably like her missing daughter. Lynn had been a devoted fan, making the resemblance feel possible and haunting to her shaken family, reopening hope and fear once again painfully. The narrative made a comeback on the screen in the following episode, now showcasing the performance footage from the concert. The music group took part, asking the girl who had remained anonymous to reveal herself. Yet, when that happened, she was not Lynn, and the arduous quest continued unfruitfully for several more years, whispering, tragically, without any resolution for them all. That resolution came in 1994, when the slayer of Lynn confessed. The bank robber Robert Jones confessed that he had kidnapped her, indecently assaulted her, and then slain her, thus exchanging truth for mercy for his wife. The body of Lynn was discovered buried close to her residence, thus ending the riddle in a very tragic way, and also with a very clear view for a family that had never given up on her return home one day. The psychic nailed it. In 1991, John and Nancy Boso were found brutally slain in their Ferndale, Montana home. With few clues and no clear suspects, the investigation stalled. Desperate for answers, John Boso's mother turned to an unconventional source, hoping for guidance where traditional police work had failed. She contacted Danion Brinkley, a psychic who claimed his abilities emerged after surviving a lightning strike.
Danion Brinkley says he was dead for 28 minutes after being struck by lightning here in Aiken, South Carolina. He says he went to a cathedral of light and met angels.
At first, his statements sounded general, suggesting the slayer knew the victims and their home. Then, he made a chillingly specific claim. The slayer would be caught in early December and was a young man attending a college somewhere in the western United States. In December 1993, a student named Joseph Shadow Clark began telling classmates at George Fox College in Oregon that he had slain multiple people. Alarmed, they contacted authorities. Clark was arrested and eventually confessed to the Bozo slayings, abruptly ending a case that had gone cold. The story later aired publicly, shifting attention from the crime itself to the eerie accuracy of the psychic's prediction. Although Brinkley did not directly solve the case, the timing and details left many unsettled. The case remains one of the most unsettling examples of coincidence, intuition, or something far harder to explain. The Real Bay Harbor Butcher. In Tampa Bay, Joan Rogers and her 2 teenage daughters were found bound, gagged, and weighted with concrete blocks, their bodies dumped in the water. The family had been traveling from their Ohio farm on a long road trip, stopping at attractions like SeaWorld, Epcot, and theme parks along the way during the early 1990s. Along the route, they met a man who offered to take them on a boat ride around the bay. Instead, he indecently assaulted and slew all 3 women. Investigators were left with little evidence beyond a handwritten note containing directions to a local hotel. The handwriting did not match any victim, leaving the case cold for years. The authorities employed a novel method after there were no significant clues following the case's public airing in 1991. They showed the handwriting from the note on a giant board. It was two women who identified it as the one that was used by a local contractor whose signatures they had always thought were similar to the composite sketch. Their finding resulted in a good lead for the detectives after a long period of frustration. Oba Chandler was the name of the man who was later apprehended and tried for the slayings and executed in 2011 as well. The case went down in the books for its inventive breakthrough that indicated persistence and unconventional thinking could win where traditional investigation had hopelessly failed. It served at last to deliver long-delayed justice to the mourning families and to the investigators, too. When medicine failed justice. In 1989, 3-month-old Ryan Stallings Jr. was rushed to the hospital after doctors found high levels of ethylene glycol in his blood, a chemical found in antifreeze. Believing an infant could not ingest it accidentally, physicians suspected intentional poisoning. Attention quickly turned to Ryan's mother, Patricia Stallings, transforming a medical crisis into a criminal case. Ryan was placed in protective custody and initially appeared stable. After Patricia was allowed to visit, he died the next day. Pregnant at the time, Patricia was arrested and charged with slaying. When her second son, David, was born, he was also taken into custody and soon developed the same symptoms, despite Patricia having no contact with him. Doctors later diagnosed David with a rare genetic disorder called methylmalonic acidemia, or MMA, which can mimic antifreeze poisoning in blood tests. Crucially, this diagnosis was never introduced at Patricia's trial. She was convicted and sentenced to life in prison while the true cause of Ryan's death went unrecognized. The case unraveled when a biochemist reviewed the evidence and tested Ryan's preserved blood, confirming MMA as the cause of death. Patricia's conviction was overturned, her name cleared, and David returned home, highlighting how misunderstood science can lead to devastating injustice. If that ending made you pause, stay with us, because what comes next defies explanation. Craig Williamson finds himself. In August 1993, Craig Williamson vanished from his motel room in Colorado Springs while traveling on business. He lived in Wisconsin with his second wife, Christine Reinhardt, where they operated a fish farm selling tilapia to restaurants. His motel bed was untouched, most belongings remained behind, and his car was later found abandoned in Mexico. Reinhardt believed her husband had suffered a head injury weeks earlier and suspected he had developed amnesia after being attacked or robbed. She theorized that disoriented and unable to remember his life, he wandered away and possibly traveled west toward places he once knew. Police were skeptical, finding no evidence of a crime and dismissing reported sightings. Reinhardt, however, not only endured the backlash, but also took her case to the public. After some time, the case became a hot topic and was even shown on television. The investigators did not know that Williamson was one of the viewers. He was then living in Key West, Florida, where he made the call to Reinhardt and his first wife after seeing the program because he had recognized his own story. Williamson stated that he remembered nothing of his marriage or previous life, but he considered that Reinhardt's theory was in accordance with what he had gone through. The police were still skeptical concerning the amnesia situation, but as there was no evidence of a crime, they decided to drop the case. The weird ending kept the wonderings about the case alive. Yet, it did reconnect a lost man with the reality of what he had been, even if he couldn't recall the process of becoming that person again. Abducting Kayla. On July 4, 2017, 9-year-old Kayla Unbahon vanished from Wheaton, Illinois, after attending a 4th of July parade. Her parents were separated, and her father had full custody. When he went to pick her up from her mother's home, both Kayla and her mother were gone. Police immediately opened a missing child investigation. Despite searches, alerts, and years of effort, the case remained unresolved. By November 2022, Kayla was still missing, now a teenager. The case gained renewed attention through a national television feature, giving investigators and her family a final surge of hope after years of painful uncertainty. That break came unexpectedly in North Carolina. A shopping mall employee recognized Kayla and her mother from the broadcast and contacted authorities while they were still inside the store. Police confirmed their identities, arrested Heather Unbahon on fugitive charges, and safely took Kayla into protective custody. In May 2023, Kayla, then 15, was reunited with her father in Illinois. Heather later surrendered, pleaded guilty to child abduction, and received probation. After nearly 6 years apart, the case ended with relief, closure, and a long-awaited return home. Double slaying in 1982. In January 1982, Colorado resident Barbara Bobby Joe Oberholzer failed to return home after meeting friends for drinks. The next morning, a farmer 30 miles away discovered her driver's license on his property. A search soon uncovered her body in the snow, with a cord tied around one wrist. Nearby, investigators also found house keys and a single orange sock that did not belong to her at the scene initially. On the same day, cocktail waitress Annette Schnee was reported missing. Her remains surfaced 6 months later, wearing the matching orange sock. Investigators noted a business card belonging to Jeff Oberholzer, Barbara's husband, in Schnee's wallet, making him an obvious suspect, despite his cooperation. Despite passing a polygraph test and having an alibi witness, Oberholzer's guilt remained a question for a long time. A man stepped up in 1990 to corroborate his claims regarding his presence at the time. Years later, the new DNA test results eventually pointed to the 70-year-old Alan Lee Phillips as the slayer. Eventually, almost 40 years after the slayings, Phillips was found guilty of 2 charges of first-degree slaying. At that time, the detectives found that he had been saved by patrolling officers from the blizzard that slayed the two, a scary coincidence that ultimately closed one of the longest riddles in Colorado. The missing child who returned. In November 2017, 7-year-old Abdul Aziz Khan was taken from Atlanta by his mother, Rabia Khaled, during a bitter custody dispute. Khaled was separated from Aziz's father, Dr. Abdul Khan, who remained a devoted and active parent. As court proceedings increasingly favored him, Khaled disappeared with Aziz and her boyfriend, Elliot Blake Bourgeois. For years, the case remained cold despite national attention and repeated pleas from Abdul Khan. Investigators believed Aziz could be anywhere, possibly living under a false identity. Birthdays passed, milestones were missed, and hope slowly faded until renewed public exposure brought the case back into focus years later. In February 2025, deputies in Highlands Ranch, Colorado, responded to a possible burglary at a vacant home. They discovered a parked car with 2 children inside. After questioning the adults, officers made a shocking identification. The woman was Khaled, and the older child was Aziz, alive more than 1,000 miles from home. After 7 years away, Aziz, now 14, was reunited with his father in May 2025. Khaled was arrested, pleaded guilty to child abduction, and received probation. The case ended with long-delayed answers and a reunion once thought impossible. Missing World War II letters. In 1986, an exterminator named Mike Minges made an unexpected discovery while working in the attic of a home in Raleigh, North Carolina. What began as a few scattered envelopes led to a duffel bag containing hundreds of old letters.
But this is a journey that goes back more than 70 years. It would be a reunion if the World War II soldier who penned these letters in the early 1940s had shown them to his children.
The forgotten correspondence would soon reveal a story spanning war, time, and lost connections. The bag held 235 letters written by 92 American soldiers serving overseas during World War II. They were penned aboard the SS Caleb Strong as it sailed from Virginia to Algeria in May 1944. The letters were meant for loved ones back home, but they never reached their destinations. Instead, they sat untouched for more than 40 years. The letters were collected by this man's nephew, one of the ship's crew members, who had given the assurance to mail them. However, life got in the way, and the bag ended up being stored away and forgotten. After the bag was found, Minges assumed the role of the person to unite the letters with the right recipients. The Postal Service helped him in this extraordinary effort to track families and living soldiers. The project aimed at finding more than 150 recipients in 34 states, only using their names instead of addresses. The task took 30 months of meticulous research and commitment. Eventually, only 3 letters were not delivered. The letters, which were written decades ago, became a very powerful symbol of delayed promises kept, preserving voices from history and restoring emotional connections that were once considered lost forever. The Vallejo Armored Car Slayers. In November 1991, Northern California was shaken when 3 LMA security guards were shot during a robbery at an armored car warehouse in Vallejo. 2 guards died at the scene, while a third was rushed to a hospital and later died from his wounds. The brazen attack left investigators facing a triple homicide with no immediate suspects and immense public fear. Police recovered significant evidence, including duffel bags, gloves, masks, and other tools believed to belong to the attackers. A .357 Magnum used in the slayings was also left behind. Despite this, leads were scarce, and when the case gained national attention the following year, the investigation was still unresolved. In March 1993, Thomas Young was arrested on firearms charges, and an informant linked him to the robbery. Young confessed and named 3 accomplices, but later recanted, causing charges against others to be dropped. The case seemed to unravel, leaving families fearing justice would never come. Advances in DNA testing finally revived the investigation. Saliva recovered from a stocking mask placed on one suspect at the crime scene, leading to renewed prosecutions. Ultimately, all but 1 participant were convicted of slaying and attempted robbery. Years after the violence, the evidence spoke clearly, closing a case once defined by chaos and restoring accountability to a community forever changed after decades of fear and unanswered questions for families. The Anthrax Slayer. In October 2001, just weeks after the September 11th attacks, the United States was struck by a new wave of terror when letters laced with anthrax began arriving through the mail. Originating in New Jersey, the envelopes spread nationwide, infecting unsuspecting victims and slaying a photo editor in Boca Raton, deepening fear across an already shaken country. More letters followed, reaching Trenton, Washington, D.C., and even the offices of U.S. senators. 16 additional people were exposed, and 4 more died. Investigators believed the attacks came from a single source and traced the anthrax to U.S. military laboratories, prompting a $2.5 million reward for information leading to an arrest. The inquiry continued for a long time, about 4 years to be exact. Finally, federal prosecutors picked microbiologist Bruce Edwards Ivins as the main suspect. The proof showed that he had the means to get the particular anthrax strain that was used, and his co-workers mentioned his behavior was getting worse, which alarmed them. Before it came to the filing of charges, Ivans took his own life in 2008. The trial was never held, and the case was closed. But still, doubts and resentment continued. The letters filled with anthrax spores have been marked as one of the most terrifying homegrown terrorism incidents in U.S. history, and they have also influenced how biosecurity, investigations, and fear of public fear are handled for many years. Radio confessions. In 1991, two morning radio hosts at the Los Angeles station KROQ invited listeners to call in with stories of minor mischief meant to entertain. The segment took a dark turn when one caller delivered a rambling, detailed confession to a slaying live on air, shocking both the hosts and listeners. Despite the show's playful tone, the hosts immediately contacted the police. The recording was treated as a real lead and later aired publicly, triggering an avalanche of tips. Law enforcement received hundreds of calls, including emotional pleas from families who believed the confession might explain unsolved slayers, overwhelming investigators for weeks. As police spent more than 100 hours chasing leads, doubts began to surface. The radio station launched an internal investigation and uncovered the truth. The confession had been staged by the hosts as a publicity stunt, with no crime ever committed. Authorities responded swiftly, fining the hosts over $12,000 to cover wasted police resources totaling 149 hours. The incident ended without arrests, but left lasting damage, serving as a stark warning about media irresponsibility, public panic, and how fake confessions can cause real-world harm far beyond a radio studio. Pass the footlocker. When a man known only as Gabby moved away from Thermopolis, Wyoming, he left several belongings with his friend, New Sessions, including a locked trunk. It sat untouched for 6 years until curiosity took over. When Sessions finally opened it, he discovered a human skeleton packed inside. Instead of calling the police, he made a reckless choice. Sessions contacted Gabby first, giving him time to respond. Gabby claimed he had bought the trunk at a yard sale and had no idea what was inside. Sessions even suggested burying the remains, but his wife intervened and insisted that authorities be called. Investigators quickly determined the man had been slain years earlier. The investigation into the case came to a standstill after Gabby ending own life, and investigators ended up with a lot more questions than answers. The mystery did not go away, however, as soon as it was uncovered and the television broadcast aired. Shelley Statler, in 2017, got in touch with the police, thinking that the remains belonged to her grandfather, Joseph Mulvaney, who had been missing since 1963. Her gut feeling was proved right through DNA testing. The slaying of Mulvaney is still an officially unsolved case. The later identification of Gabby as John Morris, Mulvaney's stepson, hints at a probable family tie. One mystery has been cleared up, and the other one is still hauntingly left open. You might think you've seen the worst so far. You haven't. The next story operated right in the open. The woman who stole babies. For decades, one of the most disturbing cases connected to unsolved mysteries involved Georgia Tann, a woman who ran a large-scale black market baby ring in plain sight. From the 1920s through the 1940s, Tann preyed on poor and vulnerable families during an era when social services were rarely questioned. Publicly, she claimed to protect children. In reality, she stole babies and sold them for profit. Tann's scheme was highly organized. As county director of the Tennessee Children's Home Society, she controlled adoptions and child welfare cases with little oversight. Parents who resisted often lost their children in court because Tann had bribed family court judge Camille Kelly, ensuring rulings always went her way. With legal backing, her operation continued unchecked. Over 5,000 infants were abducted and traded for approximately $750 each, which is equivalent to about $18,000 in today's money. The majority were given to rich households, while their biological parents were informed that their children had died or were not suitable for raising. Tan had a nice living, and Kelly had comforts that were much more expensive than her income. Tan passed away in 1950, only a few days before his arrest. A long time after that, the power of television brought together a number of families who had been separated. Some mysteries take years to unfold, others hinge on a single moment. But each of these cases proves that answers can come when least expected. Truth has a way of resurfacing even after decades of silence. If any of these stories stayed with you, let us know which one impacted you most. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more true crime stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. And before you go, click the next video on your screen to continue the journey, because there are always more mysteries waiting to be uncovered.